Good morning, afternoon, and evening all. This is Yorkie with episode 7 of my in-depth track guide, and this week we are looking at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve from Montreal in Canada. We're going to be following the usual video format of starting off with the breakdown, moving on to the hot laps for both dry and wet, and then with the setups to finish off the episode. So without further ado, let's move on into the breakdown. Okay, so we gain control of the car just before the final two corners, which is a chicane at the end of the lap. And for the chicane, you basically just want to carry as much speed through it as possible. So getting that hooked up nicely, using the exit curb ever so slightly, being hard on the accelerator. We're going to open up the DRS at the activation point and obviously drain the curves before the start-finish line. Our first braking point is just before the end of the white concrete on the right-hand side of the track, just there. And we're going to be shifting down from 7th gear down into 2nd. You want to keep to the right-hand side of the track throughout the duration of this braking zone, but as we get into 4th and 3rd gear, we're going to be bringing the car over to the left-hand side of the track and aiming for the curb on the inside. Our apex point is just here on the red and white curbing. You don't want to take too much off the curb, and you want to try and keep at least 2 wheels within the white lines at all times. But our apex speed for turn 1 is 95 miles per hour, which equates to about 150 kilometers per hour. Coming out through this corner, you basically want to sacrifice a little bit of the exit to try and open up turn 2, but you can give a very short stab of the accelerator and obviously a short stab of the brake to get the car slowed down and into 1st gear, ready for turn 2. So our apex for this corner is just here on the red and white curbing on the inside, 60 miles per hour, which equates to 95 kilometers per hour, and you can hook up a relatively early apex, but there can also, depending on your line and style, hook up a medium and also a late apex. But I've hooked up a relatively early one here. Coming out through the duration of this corner, we're going to let the car drift over to the left hand side of the track. You want to be relatively cautious on the accelerator, try not to spin those rear wheels, but once you get up into 3rd gear, use about 20% of your curves. So coming into turn 3 now, our braking point is just before the 50-meter board at the red marker on the wall there. It's a relatively short braking zone, and you're basically just going to be shifting down from 5th gear down into 3rd. At this point, you basically want to try and carry as much speed into the corner as possible whilst also trying to avoid cutting it. So throwing the car in, we're aiming for the red and white curbing on the inside here. It's a very easy corner to cut across on the cross-hatching curbing on the inside here, but you really want to avoid doing it as we want to keep this lap as clean as possible. So your apex speed should be about 115 miles per hour, which equates to 185 kilometers per hour. And as you come through here, you should be bringing the throttle back in, ready for turn 4, which is pretty much completely flat out. Your apex is on the curb on the inside here. Again, an apex speed of 115 miles per hour, which also equates to 185 kilometers per hour. As you come out through the corner, you basically just want to unwind the wheel, run the curb on the exit there and try and get as close to the wall as possible without actually touching it. So doing exactly that now, we're basically completely flat out as we come now into turn 5 to the end of the first sector and now into turn 6. Our braking point is just after the 100-meter board and at the exact moment that the split pops up on the top right hand side of the screen. You're going to be shifting down from 6th gear down into 2nd, and you basically just want to keep to the right hand side of the track here and try and turn it in as relatively late as possible. So coming in and doing that, throwing the car in just after the concrete on the barrier ends and turns into a metal armco. We're going to be looking to hook up the apex on the red and white curbing on the inside here with an apex speed of about 80 miles per hour, which equates to 130 kilometers per hour. Again, another corner that's very easy to cut, and obviously we don't want to do that, keeping at least 2 wheels within the white lines at all times. So balancing the throttle and trying to sacrifice the exit ever so slightly, ready for turn 7, the right hander that immediately follows. I'm going to start bringing the power in as we bring and transition the car from left to right, hooking up the curb on the inside here with an apex speed of about 85 miles per hour, which equates to 135 kilometers per hour. So as we continue throughout the duration of this corner, you should be letting the car drift over to the left hand side of the track and bring it to the outside. We should be bringing the throttle in more and more. Once you're in 3rd gear, you should be completely flat out. Run the curb ever so slightly on the exit if necessary, and obviously relax ever so slightly as we come down the short straight down towards turn 8. So coming in underneath the bridge now, just before the shadow and the bridge actually ends, we're going to be braking and shifting from 6th gear down into 3rd. You can use 2nd to help generate a little bit of extra turning and also acceleration, but 3rd gear, it helps keep the car that a little bit more stable, whilst also providing plenty of acceleration. So shifting down into third gear now, we're going to throw the car into the corner. At this point you should be balancing the throttle and being ready, or getting ready to jump on it rather hard as we come out through this apex point of 115 miles per hour, which equates to 185 kilometers per hour. This curb isn't as aggressive as it was back in 2012, so you can attack it a little bit more and take a little bit more off than the inside. But as we come now into turn 9, that immediately follows, again hooking up the transition quite nicely here. We're going to run the curb on the inside. At this point you should be completely flat out, so you should be accelerating relatively rapidly. Your apex speed should be about 120 miles per hour, which equates to 195 kilometers per hour. But as we come out and continue through this left-hander, you're going to let the car drift over to the left-hand side of the track, grab a fourth gear before we get off the curb. You should be hooking up a fifth just before the fly-over bridge, and then we come now into the start of the final sector and into the hairpin. So at the 100-meter board is our braking point for this tight turn 10. We're going to be shifting from 6th gear down into 1st, and this is one of those places which is pretty good for both making up places and also making up time. So braking relatively hard, we're going to shift down the gears relatively rapidly, and you want to keep to the left hand side of the track to as late as possible. We're then going to bring the car in, and you want to try and hook up a relatively late apex. Ideally your apex point should be just here, as close to the curb as possible, about 45 miles per hour, which equates to 70 kilometers per hour, but hooking up the curb on the inside isn't overly important. It's just being smooth, trying to carry as much speed as possible, and also trying to get good traction coming out through the exit. So coming out of that now, you're going to basically try and get the car in a straight line as soon as possible. Balance the throttle as we're coming through 1st, up into 2nd, and coming up into 3rd you should be flat out. We're then going to drain our curves down to about 30%, get your DRS open at the activation point just back there, and we're going to bring the car over to the left hand side of the track ready for the final chicane. So at this Pirelli board just here, it's the second to last Pirelli board on the left hand side of the track before the actual chicane itself, is our braking point. We're going to be shifting from 7th gear down into 3rd, and we're going to try and keep to the left hand side of the track, and as we come through this braking zone now, we're going to throw the car in towards the first curb on the inside here. There are quite large curbs on the inside, but this first one has actually been lowered ever so slightly on the inside. It's got a bit more of a smoother slope than it did to 2012. So we're going to ride that on the inside. Your apex speed should be about 110 miles per hour, which equates to 75 kilometers per hour. Clip this on the inside here, and then as you come through into the left one, you basically just want to run the red and white curbing on the inside here, not the actual large white curbing on the inside. You want to avoid that. Again, your apex speed should be about 110 miles per hour, which equates to 175 kilometers per hour, same as the first right-hander of this chicane. And at this point, you should be bringing the throttle back in relatively aggressively, balancing it as we come through the final corner. You should be flat out from this point. Grab the 4th gear, open up the DRS, and obviously drain the rest of the curves as you keep to the right-hand side of the track to complete the lap. So moving on to the hot lap now, we're now going to basically show you the exact same lap that I used just there, with raw engine sounds so you can hear the throttle inputs and get a genuine sense of the speed. Okay, so now that you've seen the dry lap, let's move on to the wet lap and talk about the apexes and braking points in these different conditions. So once again, exactly the same principle coming through the final corner as it was in the dry. Basically just try and carry as much speed as possible. No DRS this time, so we're just going to drain the curves as we come down towards the start finish line. Keep the car over to the right hand side of the track, and we're actually going to brake 5 metres earlier than they were in the dry. Hook up exactly the same apexes as we did in the dry, but be very patient through the exit of the corner with the throttle. Very easy to spin the rear wheels, try and make sure you get that good traction. Again, pretty much the same braking point for turn 3 and 4 as it was in the dry. Turn 5, again completely flat out. Turn 6 that coming into now, probably again about 5 metres earlier. Use first gear to help generate the turn, but be very patient on the throttle coming through. Turn 7 now, very easy to spin and step out the rear end of the car. So coming into turn 8 and 9, braking point is again 5 metres earlier than it was. But again, aggressive on the curbs and also on the accelerator on the exit. You can carry quite a lot of speed through there. Coming down into turn 9 now, and we're actually going to brake 10 metres earlier than we did basically at the start of the grass on the left hand side. Hook up the mid corner apex. We're going to try and get the car in a straight line. Be very, very patient on the throttle through second gear. Just balance it probably about 60-70% to try and reduce that wheel spin and get as good traction as possible. Same amount of curves usage as we come down the straight down towards the final corner now. And again, the braking point is actually about 5-10 metres earlier. Hook up that first curb on the right hander and then obviously miss the second on the left, and drain the rest of the curves and keep to the right hand side of the track to complete the lap of a wet Montreal. So we're now going to move on to the setups that I used for this TT lap, and for the aero I was using a 3-2 on the front and rear. For our brakes I was using a 49-51 with a high pressure and a standard brake size. Balance of the car was a 9 and a 5, basically just helps to keep that car feeling a little bit more planted on the rear. A 1-1 on ride heights, and then a 9 and then a 3, with a 3 helping with traction. These were the gear ratios that I was using, slightly longer first and second gear, and obviously the gears in kilometers per hour here as well. And then these are the camber and toe settings that I was using, so a -3.5 and a -1.2 with default toe settings. So now moving on to the wet lap with a 4-3 on aero. For our brake balance, exactly the same balance as it was in the dry, just a medium pressure and a standard brake size. Ever so slightly softer on the balance on the front anti-roll bar and also on the rear. And then again, a slightly softer rear on the spring stiffness. These are the gear ratios that I was using in the wet, and the gear ratios again in kilometers per hour for you European drivers. And then for the camber and toe, pretty much exactly the same as it was dry. So that's going to conclude it for this in-depth track guide, episode 7 of Circuit Gilles Villeneuve from Montreal and Canada. Please give the video a rating, leave any comments or questions that you have down in the comment section below, and of course don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. I shall hopefully see you soon, guys. Take care.